By now you've probably heard of Catalyst Browse and how it can be used with the a7S3, the a7siii and the ZV-1 to create really stable handheld footage. I thought I'd add another video to the mix explaining exactly how to use it, when you should use it, and also putting it through its paces with some test shots which you'll see throughout the video. So firstly, let's go through how this all works. Now I don't think it's clear in other people's videos, but Catalyst Browse is not a stabilisation software. It's a software made by Sony, so people with Sony cameras can go through their footage, play it and export it in a different format if necessary. At the moment, the stabilisation in Catalyst Browse only works with the Sony a7S3, the ZV-1, the a7siii and I think one of the FX cameras as well. And this is because these are the only Sony cameras, as far as we know, with gyro sensors in them. So it's feeding that gyro data back to Catalyst Browse. So on these cameras, while you're recording video, it's also recording data as to how the camera is being held and which direction, what the tilt is, and all that sort of information gets put in the metadata. And this is what helps Catalyst Browse stabilize the footage. And this is how it differs from, say, warp stabilize in Premiere Pro or stabilisation in Final Cut, because they're sort of digitally analysing the image to see where it went shaky, whereas Catalyst Browse is actually using gyro data from inside the camera. So you don't get as much of those sort of wonky artifacts and those weird wobbling that you get when you use Warp Stabilizer. So what do you actually need in order to get this working? Well, the first thing is you need to be filming in either XAVC-S or XAVC-SI on the Sony a7S3. XAVC-HS is not supported yet, and you can't even view the files on Catalyst Browse, let alone stabilise them. The second thing is you need all your stabilisation in camera turned off, so Steadyshot off and Active Steadyshot off as well. You can actually have Active Steadyshot on and it will record gyro data and it will attempt to stabilise it in Catalyst Browse, but it looks terrible and I'll probably show an example here somewhere. Next, you'll need to be an absolute savage and turn your shutter to 1/200 at least. The 180-degree shutter rule obviously creates motion blur, and motion blur does interfere with the stabilisation process and footage can look a little bit weird afterwards. Finally, I recommend filming in 4K if you possibly can. This crops in quite a bit to get the best results, and so obviously filming in 4K will give you a little bit of room for cropping, especially if you're delivering in HD. Now while I've been out and about, I've been doing some shots comparing the Active Steadyshot to a gimbal shot to the Catalyst Browse stabilizer shot. And you've probably already seen a couple of these, but I just wanted to show you how you actually go about doing this through Catalyst Browse. So once you're in Catalyst Browse, you can have a Browse and View tab. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is find your files. So down here you have Devices, click your device and then just find the files that you want to stabilise. Now this shows all of your clips, and if you film them in the right format, you should just be able to click them and it should just play pretty smoothly. You also have a lot of information down the side here, from your codec to your frame rate to your bit rate, to whether autofocus was on, to whether stabilisation was on, and lots more, as well as your shutter angle. So yeah, really helpful little section down the side here. But if you go back to the Browse tab, you'll notice that each of my video files have this little icon in the top right, which is like a little shaky video icon. And if we click this, it says that this contains stabilisation metadata. Now, despite what I said earlier about not using Active Steadyshot along with Catalyst Browse stabilisation, this icon will actually show up even if you've used Active Steadyshot. So you will need to be careful about only stabilising those shots where Active Steadyshot is turned off. So all you need to do to stabilise your footage is find a clip that's not stabilised. So you want to go with that one. Go to the Browse tab, make sure it's highlighted and click stabilise. This bit's actually really quick, analyses it nice and quickly, and it already presents it here stabilised. So this particular screen shows the before and after. This can take a lot of processing power, so don't expect this to run smoothly. But if we play them both at the same time, you can see the one on the right is more cropped in, but also better stabilised. If this is too laggy for you, you can actually go up here and just change it to an after, so you can see the actual final result. And again, you can change it to before to see what it was like before stabilisation. You can see there's quite a big difference. Now when you click Stabilise, Catalyst Browse automatically detects how much stabilisation it thinks is necessary, and therefore how much it needs to crop into the image. But you can actually decide this yourself if you change it to manual mode. So if I'm feeling like it's a little bit too cropped in or too stabilised, or maybe not cropped in enough and maybe needs some more stabilisation, I can switch over to manual mode here. I recommend doing this most of the time, as it does tend to crop in quite a lot on the first go round, and you might not need that much. So you've got a little slider here, which is the cropping ratio, and obviously the more cropped in theory, the more stabilised it should be. So we can switch it up to 100%, which is pretty much no stabilisation, as you can see, or we can go all the way into the image and get quite a lot of stabilisation. But I do think there's a point of diminishing return somewhere in the middle, and I generally keep it around 70 to 80%. So once you're happy with your cropping ratio settings and stabilisation settings, you need to export the video from Catalyst Browse. To export the video, simply click this button at the top here, and you get to the export menu. At the top you can choose where to export to, obviously. You get your source metadata, which is the data that came from the original video file, and you can actually change some things in the transcoding. So you can change the colour space, you can change the format. If you wanted to export it in 1080 instead of 4K, you can also do that. You can change the frame rate, and also there's different render presets, but this is the highest quality one, I think, which is the 150 megabits a second. Now when you do code to export these files, they can take quite a long time. So there's actually an option here at the bottom of the menu to optimize for image quality or encoding speed. Let's say you've got a tight deadline to meet, you can optimize it for speed if you want it to just export quicker. I'm not sure quite how much this affects the image quality. That's another test completely, but there's obviously something going on behind the scenes there. For now, I'm going to leave it optimize image quality, and I'm going to click export. From here, go about your day, because it literally takes so long to export these files. And while we're waiting, I'm going to show you some more comparisons. Before we go to our final tip and some thoughts, if you are enjoying this video, please hit that thumbs up button. It takes a long time to make, going out filming all this footage and exporting it all, as well as putting it all together, as I'm sure you'd appreciate. And if you want to see more videos on the a7s III, then hit that subscribe button. Let's get back into it. So one last tip is that I found adding a little bit of warp stabilizer in Premiere Pro after you stabilize it in Catalyst Browse just helps make it just a little bit smoother. It's almost like Catalyst Browse prepares it, and then you just finish it off with Premiere Pro. No matter how much I cropped into the footage in Catalyst Browse, I never really got that gimbal-like feeling until I added the stabilisation in Premiere Pro. In my opinion, every new feature is a good thing. It's innovation, it's another option, and it's something that people can play with and figure out what works for them. But in my opinion, this probably ain't going to be used for corporate shoots or wedding shoots that rely heavily on all of the footage being used. And that's just because I can't risk getting really shaky shots and then not being able to stabilise them once I come to Catalyst Browse. What I can see it being useful for is those travel films, vlogging or personal projects where maybe you don't want to take a gimbal with you. And also places where you want to keep a low profile, maybe they frown upon cameras and so you don't want to be taking a whole rig with you. I can definitely see myself going abroad, well, when we're allowed to be going abroad, with the a7s III on its own with no gimbal and still being able to capture those gimbal-like shots. Just shoot with a little bit of a wider lens and you've really sorted. But I think for paid shoots like corporate gigs and weddings, the Active Steadyshot is actually the real deal. I think I'll be using this a lot more, as I think sometimes it looks just as good as the Catalyst browse and requires a lot less work. I'll be talking more about the active stabilisation in my full review of the a7S3 coming up. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos on the a7S3, then do subscribe down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.